Hey everybody, it's a brand new day here at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, and StarCast 2, day number 3 is underway. Tony Schiavone, and how about this? The first time that these two guys
have
been on camera together since 1988. Ladies and gentlemen, David Crockett is here with us as well.
I'm loving this.
Yeah, it's great to see you, David.
Oh, it's good to see you too, Tony.
Okay,
really
man. It's been a long time. You and I worked together for many, many years, and we're getting ready to see now. We got a full day planned here on Fight TV. We're getting ready to see Bret Hart, Sharpshooter, in his own words. And you and I had a chance to work with Bret in the 90s when he was with WCW. What a performer.
Yes, he is. And he comes from a family of sharpshooters.
Yes, he does.
Yes, he can back up anything he says. He's a dynamite man.
He really is. And also, we got a very special second screen experience watch along. We're going to see the Holy Grail, Bret Hart and Tom McGee. And Tom McGee is going to be here as well to talk about that match. Right now, though, let's go to the stage, in our Pro Wrestling Tees stage. Here's the one and only primetime himself, Sean Mooney.
Good morning, everybody. You enjoying StarCast 2? Hasn't it been fantastic, these live stage shows? And I happen to think that this one is going to be one of the best, one of the all-time best. Sharpshooter, Bret Hart, in his own words. And Bret Sergeant Hart, the 8th child out of 12 for Stu and Helen Hart. Stu Hart, great wrestler in his own right? Yeah, you heard about all these wrestlers he's trained, the dungeon, you can still hear the screams. But he's a man who was destined to be in this business for life. And he knew better than anybody just how tough this business was. And I imagine along the way, he was hoping that his children might find a different way of life, but it wasn't meant to be. Along the way, all those boys stepped into the ring, but there was just one who was destined to be one of the greatest of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, the best there is, the best there was, the best there will ever be, Bret the Hitman Hart. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. The Hitman. Come on. Grab a mic, have a seat. Bret Hart's here. Had to get the coffee. We all got to get started, right?
Need a little fuel.
Yeah, got it going. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good.
Yeah? You know, I couldn't help but think, what was going through your mind when you walked into Caesars Palace? Things might come back, a few memories. April 4th, 1993, maybe. Really, what's your returning to the scene of the crime?
Well, you know, I actually have really good memories of being here for the WrestleMania 9?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed with the the plans they had for me in the future. But other than that, I mean, it was great. I remember I got off the plane and there was, my face and my pictures of me with the belt and stuff were everywhere at the airport, and it was pretty, like in a lot of ways, was some of my greatest memories. It was the first time I was the main event at a WrestleMania, and I was really honored. I will say that I had absolutely no expectation for what happened. Was my understanding, as Vince had said to me from the day I won the title, he said that you don't have to worry about anything. We're looking at you as a long-term champion. You're going to be champion here for a long time. We're thinking 6, maybe 7 years, kind of going back to what Bruno did, like where the champion holds the belt for a really long time. And that Hulk Hogan would have no bearing on anything that I was doing. But those were the first lies that they kind of told me, that in the end it was like they totally lied to me. They gave me no warning for that at all. And I know people, have a hard time understanding how it works. I'm not even sure how it works being champion, but I know that basically when you're the champion, when you have the belt in your bag and you're the guy, that you're the highest paid guy on the card. And that was a big honor for me, and I was making big plans that all the main event money I was going to be making. And instead, like when I came here, it was like, I got demoted basically, and Hulk Hogan took my spot again. And it was a big disappointment, but I was a professional, and I was honored that they allowed me to be champion at all, let alone for a few months. But I did feel that they pulled the plug on me a little early at that time.
Though you work so hard, and this match really, to me, kind of encompasses your career with the WWF, because you were always somebody that had the business in mind, doing the right thing, and then you came here and tell us about that conversation, because I know in your book you mentioned that it really did floor you, that you weren't really expecting this to come in, and as you said, they said Hulk was not going to be a part of this. He was going to come in for a bit and then go and do promotion for his movie.
Well, it was right out of nowhere. I was really baffled, but it seemed to me there was a bit of a panic, and I don't know all the details like maybe I should or could know. But I think what was happening was Hulk Hogan was trying to leverage Vince to give him a better contract than what he was being promised over at WCW. And so Vince, to sort of stop Hogan from going to WCW, sort of sacked me and gave him my promise, gave him my opportunity to give it to Hogan again, which like I said, Hulk Hogan needed another run with the belt. So I was very crushed by it. Like I was not what I expecting when I got there, and I was. And like I said, it's not the first time I had to lose a match or anything, and it was like, I expected that the moment was going to come, but maybe a year or so later. But at the same time, you have to be grateful for what you got. And I had a strong feeling in my heart that even though, like the Hulk was I was a big fan of the Hulk myself. I mean, I admired him, and I thought he was basically the king of wrestling for us at the time, and he'd done so much for the industry and all that when they came back, if they just told me like, look, we're going to put the belt back on Hulk Hogan, I wouldn't have had a big problem with it. I just felt a little misled right to the last. They didn't give me any warning or any sense of what was going on. But I also sensed that the wrestling business was changing at that time period, and I think it's safe to say, I think that the whole shtick that Hulk had with the behind the ear and the leg drop, and it was over. His run as a babyface had kind of come and gone, and I thought, even though attendance had taken a dip through that whole time, which I don't think is anything to do with me. I think it was more to do with all the sex scandals and the different scandals that Vince had at the time, with all the ring boys that were being molested by Terry Garvin and those guys. And so there was some bad things happening, and attendance dropped off a little bit, and But I'd say most of the arenas were about 3/4 full, if not full. And so it was like probably to me, it was like the fans that were coming to the matches now were looking for something different. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to be the guy that was the most over at that time. And I just thought that I knew that I said to myself when I lost the title to Yoko, who lost it to Hogan, that I would probably get it back. In my mind, in my guess, I would probably get it back in about 3 or 4 months when they realized that Hulk was a bit dried up after. And then by the King of the Ring, Hulk hadn't drawn that well, and things were not going so well for him either. And I think he was making plans to go to WCW, and they I think needed to sort of pull me back and make me build me back up to be the champion again now that Hogan was going to leave. But I also think they decided they needed a bigger guy, that I wasn't big enough, and so I think they started grooming Lex Luger to be the next champion after that, and sort of skipped me over again. And I just remember the important thing that I like to have people remember is that I remember after the match where I lost to Yokozuna, I can remember Hulk Hogan said to me, Terry came up to me and he said, I just want you to know I'd be happy to return the favor anytime. And that guy was the biggest liar in the wrestling business.
Well, I think everybody, though, here in this room would agree that you were a great champion in the WWF during your reign. And you mentioned Yokozuna because a lot of people didn't realize how much he could do in the ring, and also the way you helped promote him. So the matches that you were able to do the Sharpshooter with him. You had some great matches with Yoko.
Yoko, I never met a Samoan wrestler that wasn't a phenomenal athlete. I mean, they could run, jump, swim, do everything. They were just so athletic. And Yoko may have been a big guy. When he was, at that time, I think he was only about 500 pounds. Which, he could still move really good. He could move like a cat out there, and you'd be surprised at how quick and nimble Rodney was. He was a really good athlete. And, I remember him, he had a beautiful voice. He'd sing in the shower and stuff like that. You'd be surprised.
Bet you didn't know that, right?
But, I always kind of catered. When you're wrestling a guy that's 500-600 pounds, it's easy to wear them down by just dogging it out there. Like when he picks you up off the mat, if you make yourself heavy, you go up for a body, he goes to body slam you, and you kind of go dead weight on him. They can throw you around, and they're strong enough to throw you around, but they only got a marginal amount of gas in the fuel in the tank, so they get tired fast, and he's got to sort of recharge for a few seconds by lying on the mat. So I always catered to Yoko I did all the running. I let him sort of stand in the middle, and I'd run into him and stuff like that. But I made it so, and I think he always appreciated that when I worked with him, that I allowed him to store his energy till the ending of the match, because it was the kind of thing, if you got a 600-pound guy that's really tired, and then he falls on you, it could be your last match. So.
And you never hurt anybody, and thank God that nothing major happened with Yoko.
No, I was lucky that way, but I do remember he would do that leg drop.
Yeah, I think people know who Bret Hart is. I don't think you need that.
He would do his leg drop on me, and he had those red nylon kind of tights that he had.
Yeah.
And he would leave his whole imprint of his tights would be on my face. And then maybe the next night he'd do it from a different angle, and then another angle, and then I'd start to have like skin like a lizard. I really did. And I used to marvel at it because he was really safe. I don't remember Rodney ever hurt me, but I do know that every time I worked with him, especially when he was following me on me, I usually took a good deep breath and kind of closed my eyes. I enjoyed most of the matches I had with Yoko, and we had a good chemistry together, and I think he he liked the way we worked, and so did I.
And I want to talk a lot more about your road in the WWF, but we'd be remiss. I know it's been a tough week, as it is every year for the Hart family. And they say that you die twice. First when you draw your last breath, and then the second time when people stop remembering your name. And this week it was awesome to see Remembering Owen. And I'm sure a lot of thoughts in your mind this week about your little brother.
Yeah, May's a tough month in my family. It just happens to be the month where there's a lot of birthdays in that month in my family. I think there's like 5 or 6 or even more of that with the grandkids and stuff in my family. But May's birthday month in the Hart family, and Owen's birthday was in May. So and then he died, of course, in May. So it's a tough month from the beginning of May to the end of May, and with Davey dying and so many guys that they all seem to die in May. So in my family, it's sort of you got the black flag up for the whole month kind of thing, and it's tough. But at the same time, with Owen, it's so nice that so many people remember him all the time, and they remember him in a certain way, like different than what you hear about other wrestlers. They remember Owen for all of his kind acts, and I think that's how I like to remember him. I have no problem, on remembering Owen on the day he died. And I know someone that wanted me to come out here and tell Owen stories for an hour or something, but
I don't think they'd mind.
I don't really have any Owen stories that I haven't already told, and it's not so easy to talk about all the memories and things that happened with Owen. It's kind of a bit of an emotional drain to you sometimes, and so I choose to, when I think about Owen, I just kind of usually watch some of our old matches back and some of our old promos and stuff, and I've been really lucky. I've been blessed with so many funny memories and stories about all of them. Owen, Davey Boy, Jim the Anvil, even the Dynamite Kid, and I can go on and on. But I have such good memories with all those guys that when you start sort of swimming through all the memories in your head, you can find so many that make you laugh, and it's easy to smile when you think of those guys.
There are a couple of the really funny ones, because Owen had such a great sense of humor. I love the story about Hacksaw calling down to the front desk, but are there a couple that really stand out?
Well, I like to always tell the one about what he did with my dad, where there was a wrestler named Reg Park, and he would Reg was the guy that made all the belts for WWE a few years ago. He's a great guy. He was a sort of a well-built, like when he got into wrestling, I think he'd been a bodybuilder, so he had a pretty good physique. But if you ever knew Reg, he was like one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. Very quiet, kind of easygoing kind of guy. And when we went to WrestleMania, I'm going to say WrestleMania 4, I brought, probably actually it was WrestleMania 5. No, maybe it was 4. I don't know, one of the two. But I brought my dad down with me and my youngest daughter, and we had a suite at the hotel. And I just remember getting up in the morning. It was probably about 9:30 in the morning, and my dad was just kind of waking up. He had a big nightshirt on. He was wandering around the hotel room with a nightshirt on. And my phone rang, and I remember I got the phone. I answered it, and I didn't know it was Owen because he disguised his voice. And he's like, anyway, he had this dry, raspy voice of like Reg Park. He could do Reg Park perfectly. And he said, "Is your dad there now? Just tell him it's Reg Park. I want to just talk to him for a minute." So I remember holding the phone, and I said, "You want to talk to Reg Park?" And my dad was always liked Reg, and it's like, "Give me the phone." So I hand my dad the phone, and then Owen starts on my dad about, first they go through some nice, how are you, Stu? And my dad, not too bad, and they're talking away, and all of a sudden I could just see my dad's face changing, and Owen was saying all kinds of stuff to my dad on the phone about, "You were a chicken shit. You were always afraid of me. you were always so gutless. You never had the guts to take me down the basement. I would have kicked your ass if you had, and all this stuff. And my dad's like flabbergasted. And I just see him wandering around the room. He's holding the phone in his hand, and I'm like, he's talking to the nicest guy in the world as far as I know. And all of a sudden my dad's starting to get heated on the phone. And he's like, Reg, if you'd wanted to try me, why didn't you try me? And I remember kind of almost being shocked at what the hell's Reg Park doing? And the truth is that Owen, who kept like laughing because he kept pushing all my dad's buttons and saying stuff to him, but he kept like holding the phone away from him, and then he'd go back on and he'd start laughing again. And then he'd say something else to my dad about, you were always a gutless promoter, and like whatever it was. I just remember my dad getting so mad, and Owen pushed it and pushed it and pushed it with my dad, because my dad had bit into it. He'd swallowed this thing. He thought he was talking to Reg Park, and he couldn't believe it. And I just remember my dad slamming the phone down and sitting on the chair, and he was like, just had this funny, sad look on his face, and he kind of a smile, and he goes, the bastard got me. I remember I still didn't really know what it was till Owen told me later. But I guess Owen told me that he laughed so hard that he had to finally say to my dad, after he really said a lot of, strong things to him, he finally had to just cut in and go, it's me, it's Owen. I'm just pulling your leg or something like that. And that's when my dad slammed the phone down. And so I didn't know till Owen told me later, and would tell me often on the plane, that was the funniest memory that he ever had, how he pulled my dad's tail that day. And there was that kind of stuff every day with Owen. And you can live by those memories.
Why didn't you ever try me? That's awesome. And I know that, we all wonder what might have been with Owen. He always was just such a great performer. And I think back to those days when you had literally your brothers, and I consider Davey Boy one of them. But it wasn't an easy road for you in the WWF. People might remember the big moments where you finally reached these heights, but you struggled a while in the WWF. And when you look back at that, was it a really valuable time? Do you cherish it in a sense? Because you never, ever gave up.
Well, I was always proud of my work. I remember when I got to WWF back in those days, how they thought I couldn't wrestle. They didn't know anything about me. They barely heard of me, and in those days they'd stick you in a match with a lot of guys that didn't know who I was either, and didn't care who I was, and didn't want to perform with me, didn't want to try anything with me. They didn't offer anything to me. It was just like, go out there and let's just do nothing out there, and they just didn't. I was not worth, getting into a big sweat over. No one wanted to bump for me or fly for me or make me look good or anything like that. And so it was really hard. I remember wrestling some guys that just purposely killed the match and didn't do anything with me. And when it came time for me to make a comeback or something, they didn't give me any, they would move on my drop kick or whatever I did. They didn't trust me. They didn't give anything to me. And if you have enough of those kind of matches, which I did for 3 or 4 months, I was plus one other match for I think almost 6 months straight in WWE in 1984. And it was tough because they had promised me when they brought me in, they said, we're going to put you with all the top guys, and you're going to be a big star here. And I remember kind of rolling my eyes and thinking, I don't believe any of that. But at the same time, it's like, that's what they said. So I'll be an optimist and hope that maybe they find some way to make me a star down there. But it was very hard to convince anyone that I was any good when nobody would help me. Wrestling's a lot more like figure skating than anything else. When I think of pro wrestling, you need somebody to help you, especially if you're a good guy. You need the bad guy to do stuff to you to get sympathy and then allow you to make a big comeback and kind of let you shine a little bit. But I wasn't in that kind of category at that time. So I didn't impress anyone with my wrestling style. Usually it was like an arm drag or a sunset flip or your very basic kind of preliminary wrestling moves. But I remember when they eventually tagged me up with Jim and we worked with the Bulldogs. And I can remember Chief Jay Strongbow, who was one of Vince's right-hand guys in the office in those days. He told my dad, he goes, he's finally starting to get it. And I remember my dad goes, he had it a long time ago. You know, I'd wrestled.
He had it when he got there.
I'd wrestled Nick Bockwinkel, who was AWA champion. I wrestled him for an hour draw in Calgary during the Stampede. And I'd wrestled some. I've been to Japan. I was a better wrestler than they ever thought, and I know that I just was patient. And I know I told the story at the Hall of Fame this year about it was like, I think it was the first match that Vince could watch me in a house show, not a TV taping. He'd seen me wrestle at TV tapings where you just do squash matches, and you know, he'd watched little bits and pieces of me, but he'd never actually seen me have a bona fide real match with a real team on a good spot in the card and where I could really perform. And that was why I told that story at the Hall of Fame, was because we worked with the Killer Bees and we tore the house down. We were on like second match or something, and we had such a good match, and the whole place was just rocking and cheering like really loud when we went back to the dressing room. And I can remember Vince standing there when I came through the curtain, and he held out his hand and he goes, "Hell of a match." And I know there was a moment there where we looked at each other and he had a big smile. I think he was genuinely pleased with my match. Like I don't know how he couldn't have been, but I think he kind of looked at me like that was like, I had no idea that you guys could be that good. And I think that was the first time I was on Vince McMahon's radar, and that's why I told that story. But I slowly but surely started to get people to give me a little more rope. Actually, the key to my success all came from the idea of turning into a bad guy and turning partner with Jim the Anvil and being the Hart Foundation. Because once I was, I remember wrestling a guy named Terry Gibbs. I don't know if you guys remember Terry Gibbs. He was like a job guy. But he would wrestle me, and I remember he came back to the dressing room and he was talking about me after the match, and he said something along the lines that I would never get it. I just couldn't get it. I couldn't understand what I was doing out there or something like that. And I remember it bugged me that he said that I couldn't get it. And I think I was probably one of my last babyface matches is at that time. And then they turned me into a bad guy with Jim. And it was such a great experience. I got to be the driver in the car now. I could be the bad guy, and I could take all the Bret Harts that were in WWF at the time and give them these great matches and really have some really great matches and show everybody that I could work a good match. And that's what happened. Once I tagged up with Jim, I was driving the car. Like we set the pace, we set the style, and we build the story, and we just make the good guys look good, kind of thing. And that was what saved me.
Yeah, awesome. And so many great matches along the way, and the ones that stand out to me with Kurt Hennig and Roddy, and we need 3 hours to go into some of these. But the one big happening that stands out is the screw job, and if you want to, everybody's heard about this, but the one thing that I like to know that I want to talk about is the documentary Wrestling with Shadows, which is awesome that was made, because it really showed who you were. And the one point is that when it all came down to it, it wasn't a matter of you losing that belt on Canadian soil.
No, nothing to do with that. Even that there was some documentary, or not something that came out a few months ago on the screw job that they interviewed me for, but they did such a shitty job. I thought they really only made it more confusing. The simple truth of everything is that when I found out I was working with Sean, I went to Sean and said to him, like, hey, Sean, I heard we're wrestling at Survivor Series. I just wanted you to know that I have no problem putting you over. I'll put you over any way they want. I have no problem dropping the belt to you. And I just wanted you to know that I would always be a professional in the ring. I wouldn't take out any of my... Sean and me had some fisticuffs in the dressing room prior to all this. So I didn't want him to know that. I wanted him to know that he would be safe in the ring with me, that I didn't carry any hard feelings towards him, and that I had no problem dropping the belt to him. And Sean looked at me and said, I appreciate that, but I just want you to know I'm not willing to do the same thing for you. And that was it. That's what the screw job was all about. It's like, well, that is such an insult to tell somebody, like, you know, I'm happy to help you and your family, but then he says to me, like, well, I'm not going to do anything for you and your family. It's kind of like they cross each other off. It's like, oh, well, screw you. You know, I'm not doing anything for you either. And I told Vince the next day after that happened, and Vince was going to call Sean and me into a room and confront Sean on his stupid comment. And the next day, Vince never touched any of that and promised Sean the belt. And I stood up in the room and I said, I just want you to know I'm not sure I'm going to do anything till I know what's going on with my career. Because Vince was threatening to break my contract. And so I was in a position of, you know, just trying to be professional. And the whole screw job was just a case of somebody insulting you and telling you that he would never, ever do anything like that, never do the same favor for you. And I was the champion. I remember going, I'm the champion here. I already promised him I'd drop the belt to him. And I just stuck to my guns there. I was like, I'm not going to drop the belt to him until he loses to me somewhere and proves to me that he's got enough respect for me to, you know, to do the honors for me. Then I'll do the honors for him. And that's where the whole rift came in.
But you genuinely have mended that fence. And
yeah, I actually just saw Sean not too long ago, and you know, we got along like we did when we were good friends years and years ago. And I don't think there's any issues between me and Shawn Michaels anymore.
And a lot had to happen along the way there. But what did it mean to be inducted the first time to the WWE? Because a lot of people didn't think that might ever happen.
Oh, it was very important to me, as was my career. You know, when I had my stroke in 2002 and I was in the hospital, which was bad enough as it was. Like, I was like totally confused and just totally bummed out about what having a stroke and not understanding even what the long-term consequences of a stroke were. But I remember they had just brought a phone to my room so I could make local calls. And I plugged the phone in, and my phone rang, and it was Vince McMahon on the phone. And I hadn't talked to Vince McMahon since I sat on a park bench with him when Owen died. I hadn't seen or talked to him in quite a long time. And I had a lot of bad blood still towards Vince and the company. But it was out of nowhere, and I answered the phone. I remember there was this hesitation about like slamming the phone down. Like, I wanted to slam it down. But at the same time, the other side of me, like, Vince was like very much like a father figure to me, and somebody I had a lot of respect for once upon a time. And I restrained myself from hanging up on him and talking to him. And I was, like I say, I was kind of a shattered mess anyway. I could barely hold the phone and stuff like that. And but he talked to me about. I had always talked to Vince about releasing Best of Bret Hart. Like, we always talked about, like, whenever I had a really good match, he would always go, "That's what's going to go on the anthology we're going to put out of you. Like, when we're done with your career, it's like you're going to have this DVD set or whatever." We just talked about it, and I remember we talked about it that day on the phone, and he said, "We'd still like to do that with you." And I said, "I'd like to do that. That would mean a lot to me to have I didn't want my career and everything I did just to kind of get erased and minimized." And so we had a nice talk, and the more he talked to me then about being in the Hall of Fame. And I said, well, if you ever offered the Hall of Fame for me, I said I would most definitely come. I feel I have a right to be there, and I earned it. And So he promised me that it would happen, and I was grateful for that. And I remember I kind of hung up the phone, and after we talked, and he gave me a big pep talk about I was a fighter, and I was going to beat this thing. And I just found his words really helped at that critical moment when I kind of maybe needed a pat on the back or some support. And so I was always grateful for it. I remember I hung up the phone, and that was the first step towards thawing out our bitter, the problems that happened between us.
In this past year's class, and long awaited, a lot of people wanted to see this happen, that you were inducted again with the Hart Foundation, and a great tribute to Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And Brett, I thought it was awesome. Not only did you pay tribute to Jim, but also all of these other great tag teams that we had a chance to see back then, and there were so many.
My speech, in case you didn't notice, was really important to me this year, and I wanted very much to speak on Jim's behalf, and just say some nice things about. Like I watched some of these Hall of Fame speeches. I won't name names, but so many wrestlers that were up there never thanked anybody. They thanked Stephanie, and they thanked Vince, and they thanked Triple H, and I thought it was such bullshit. They should thank the wrestlers that made them and the wrestlers that worked with them. And I was really disappointed at how so many of them never thanked any of the wrestlers that went to all the trouble to help them in their careers. Most of them never had any recollection of anybody helping them. And I was disappointed with a lot of the speeches. I remember going, these guys are the shits. If they ever get me to go up there, I got things I'd like to say about the wrestlers that worked with us and helped us. And I was glad that I was able to, even in a small way, to thank some of the teams like the Bees and the Rougeau brothers and the Haku and Tonga Kid, and there was so many teams we worked with, but they were so good, and the Bulldogs too. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it just insane that the Freebirds and some of these other teams, the Rock and Roll Express, are in the Hall of Fame when they never even wrestled in WWE? I was there in the dressing room when Andre the Giant fired Michael Hayes because he was drunk, and he was fired, and they were done. And I know Terry Gordy came around later, but his brain had been removed by then. And no, I mean, it's true. I mean, Terry Gordy was a great wrestler, but he did way too many drugs, man. There was nothing. The lights were on, and nobody was home anymore, and that's just the sad truth at the time. But I felt that the Hart Foundation, not just the Hart Foundation, but the Bulldogs, the Demolition, even the Killer Bees and the Rougeau brothers, as far as teamwork and moves and things like that, they were all established, great working teams from whatever territories they came from. But we were all really good wrestlers, and to have that opportunity to thank them for all the matches where they made me and all the matches that we had, such safe wrestlers. Like Jim Brunzell could throw the greatest dropkick in wrestling and never hurt you. He was such a pro. Brian Blair was a great wrestler. Both the Rougeau brothers were solid wrestlers. And I think of Tito and Rick Martel, and you can just go on and on. Even the Rockers. How is it that the Rockers are not in the Hall of Fame? And how is it that the Midnight Express are, or not the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express are? I was there in the dressing room when they told the Rock and Roll Express that they were too small and they weren't good enough to be on WWE TV. And I go, there's something wrong with the Hall of Fame when they don't pay homage to the guys that really did the work. Even Demolition, I think there's a concussion lawsuit going on so they've been kind of blackballed. They're not allowed, they can't celebrate them or give them any credit for what they did. They were the tag team through the 90s or 80s, and if you're gonna give the Freebirds a free pass into the Hall of Fame for nothing, for being drunk all the time, then
right.
I think you could give Demolition or the Killer Bees or shit, even the Hillbillies, Elmer and Hillbilly Jim. I mean, at least they did the work. You know, they were there. They're actually in the dressing room putting their boots on. They did the time. And I think that's what I find sort of troubling about the Hall of Fame sometimes.
There's some politics involved. But I have to also give you credit. There was a little interruption during that speech, and were you like, what the hell was going on?
I'm waiting for it to happen again.
He's going to be ready this time.
Well, I felt bad that happened, and when I think about it now, it's like you got that stubborn heart, stubbornness now. It's like I was determined to finish my speech, damn it, and I wasn't.
You did a great job.
I came here for a reason. I wanted to speak about Jim the Anvil, and I worked hard on my speech. I worked for about 2 weeks on it, sort of tweaking it, and I thought I had it down right. And when that guy interrupted it and tried to ruin it, I was like, I think they were actually trying to clear everybody out of the ring like we were done, like next. And I was like, no, I'm not done yet. I'm not even getting warmed up yet. And so I feel bad at what happened to him, but
Really?
it wasn't such a bad day for me. It was more of a bad day for him.
Exactly. All right, we're going to open it up to questions here in a sec. I just wanted to mention one thing that really stood out to me as you wrapped that up, Bret, is you said, don't live the second half of your life regretting the first. And I just thought that just really touched me, and I know coming from you, that means a lot.
Well, I think that often, I'm sort of, people get this impression that I'm, angry, bitter guy that never got over what happened, which I never really got over what happened, but but I at the same time, I wouldn't change anything. I loved my career. I loved the work I had. I loved working with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. It was so much fun every day. I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and had so many great memories with Jim. And I just, going back to all the years that I worked for WWF and WWE, I just had so many good memories and to have had that opportunity to work with all the great wrestlers that I worked with, from Andre to, the other guys I've named, but the Bulldogs and I just loved so much of what I did, and I worked so hard, and I still stand by my work today. And so I don't have a lot of bad feelings about my career, but I do have regrets about some of the stuff that happened, like my injury. I wish that Bill Goldberg had never kicked me in the head as hard as he could. I don't know. I give a guy a Hall of Fame thing for hurting as many wrestlers that Bill Goldberg hurt, and without consequence. I mean, he usually got a pat on the back and told how good a job he did out there when you were scraping the wrestler that worked with him off the mat. And so I feel bad sometimes that, when Bill Goldberg kicked me in the head, honest to God, I lost about $16 million in like 1 second. It's like all the contract money that I had. I just signed with WCW for $3 million a year for another 3 years on top of the 2 years that I had left on my original contract. So it was bad timing, and it was unfortunate. And I know Bill never did it on purpose, but I think that's why a few months ago I was as stiff as I was about Seth Rollins hurting guys in the ring. To be honest, in pro wrestling, injuries do happen. And there's always going to be injuries and things that happen from unexpected things. But it's not about hurting each other. It's about, like I said, it's more like figure skating. And if you can't go out there and figure skate with me, don't work with me. I'm not about you're chopping me. I can remember Ric Flair used to like chopping me all the time. And they hurt. You get these blisters on your chest, and you handprint on your chest for like 3 days, and it's funny. I always remember going, that's what they do to the rookies. They give them, they chop you and keep chopping you, and it's like they think it's a badge of honor or something. which is probably why everyone in the building goes, woo, But it hurts. And I remember Rick telling me, I said, Rick, no more chops. No more chops. He goes, but it's part of my thing. I've always do a chop. It's like people expect it. And I said, if you do a chop, I said, I got a move I do. I said, you go ahead and chop me. Give me a big chop. I'll give you my whole chest and everything. And then I'll look at you like this, and then I'll punch you right in the mouth as hard as I can. And I remember Rick looked at me and he said, are you kidding? I said, no, I'm not. I said, I'll punch you right in the nose as hard as I can. And we never did chops after that. And it was like...
Yeah, awesome. More good memories than bad. That's fantastic. Folks, we're going to open up for a brief period here and get some questions in. I want to shout out to our folks that are watching on Fight TV. If you're going to watch along with, we got the Holy Grail coming up, the match with Bret Hart and Tom McGee. And if you're watching at home, you're going to have a second screen experience. You want to go to the WWE Network. It is just do a search on Tom McGee, and it will be 19 minutes and 40 seconds in. I'll tell you again, but so you can get it queued up. Now let's get some questions going. I think we've got a microphone out there in the crowd.
Brett, Vince Averill from Los Angeles. Yesterday, Arn Anderson told a story about you putting a prosthetic ear into his double sea breeze. Do you have any recollection of having done that, and whose fake ear it was?
It was some friend of Ted DiBiase's. Some guy that went to college with Ted DiBiase, and I can remember sitting with at the bar, and he could take his ear right off and show it to you. It looked like a little rubber ear, and so they kept getting. I remember Kurt and Arn Anderson were drinking. It was like, actually, I think it was Arn Anderson's last night in the WWE. He had left and was going back to WCW like the next day. It was his last. So everyone was sort of having a send-off in the bar for him. Drinking with him and slapping him on the back and mostly just telling stories and having a good last night with Arn. And Kurt kept getting him to sing some song about there's a ear in my beer or whatever. And it was like some Hank Williams song.
Ear in my beer.
I think it was a tear in my beer is how the song goes. But they had dropped the ear into his beer and they kept singing the song, and Arn was singing it, and I remember everybody in the bar was in on it, like everyone was laughing, and I wish they had iPhones back then with all the cameras, but it was just so funny when Arn realized it, and when he looked at his glass, as drunk as he was, and he looked at the glass and there was an ear in it, I remember he threw up all over the counter.
All right, let's get another one in.
Hey, Brett, Matt McCarthy from Rumford, Rhode Island. We all know how the relationship ended, but I'm curious, do you have a favorite Vince story?
Well, I have the one which I've told a few times about the strip bar in San Antonio. It's such a great, I don't know if I got all day to tell you that story, but all I say is this, is that Vince showed up at this very fun-filled strip bar in San Antonio that we were all sort of celebrating, and we had just been told that we were going to start Olympic drug testing, like on a scale that nobody had ever seen before. We had actually the Olympic drug testers hired to start testing us, and there'd be no tolerance for anything, no drugs, no steroids, no nothing. Like every single thing, even marijuana was done, which I think sadly was really a big mistake, because I think once they took away the marijuana from a lot of wrestlers, you'd see them down in the bars later just taking pills and drinking all the time, and you see all these wrestlers that died over the next 15 years. There was a lot of them started from when taking away their marijuana. They'd go to their room and smoke a joint and go to bed. Nobody ever heard from them. Now they're in the bars drinking hard liquor and taking pills, and it's like that was a fatal mistake that I think they eventually recognized that it was a step in the wrong direction. But anyway, I'll just say that with Vince showed up really drunk, and I remember Hogan was talking about him and Hawk and Animal were in the bar, and Hawk was talking pretty brashly about how they were gonna do their finish on Vince in the bar, and I remember hearing it and going, that I want to see. And so I remember saying, I think they're going to do it. And I remember telling Jim, and I remember Jim was pulling on his beard, and Jim was going, they don't got the guts. They're not going to do it. You know, and I said, yeah, they're going to do it. And I remember Hawk was already up on a pole. Whatever the girl was on the pole was gone now, and it was Hawk up there. And Animal came up behind Vince, who was so drunk. I mean, he was in a very happy place anyway. And all of a sudden, he picked him up, came up from behind and put his head between his legs and stood up, and Vince almost lost his balance. And I can remember, oh my God, they're going to do it. And that finish of Hawk and Animals, that clothesline off the top, was a pretty painful move to take, especially on your knees when you fell. It was hard. It was just carpet in that bar, no padding. And anyway, I just remember it looked so real. It looked like they were going to take his head off, and Hawk had been talking about it for the last hour about he was going to take Vince's head off. And I remember we were all sort of like, yes, go. And then Hawk dove off and gave this little powder puff clothesline that was all pretend, and Beefcake and Hogan kind of caught Vince and gently set him on the ground. Everybody gave a little golf clap, and it was like, I can remember going, how quaint, I thought they were really going to do it, and I remember Jim pulling on his beard and going, Hart Foundation would have done it. And I'm going, and I was like, yeah, maybe the Hart Foundation would have done it. And then I remember thinking, oh my God, what did I just say? And I remember I had 2 shots of Jack Daniels in my hand, and I remember trying to set him down. And by the time I set him down, Jim had already picked up Vince in a bear hug. And I remember, I'll never forget Hulk Hogan looking at me. He gave me this look like, do you got the balls to do it? Or are you going to do it like Hawk? And I remember I just kind of looked at him, and I took off, and I took Vince's head off of that clothesline.
All right, one more, and then we're going to get to the Holy Grail.
Check out We Watch Wrestling, by the way, with Vince and Matt. Hey, sir.
Hello, Jeffrey Harris. Bret, as much as it means coming up from a guy like me, I just want to thank you for all the memories you've given us and the great career you've given us. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and thank you for being here today. My question is,
Thank you.
Once you started getting into the singles act, was there ever a moment that sticks out in your mind where you realized, man, this is really working and I'm really coming into my own as a single star? One that sticks out for me was when you talked about going to Europe and how you were booked earlier on the card, and the fans started really coming after you because they were really responding to you in Europe. Was there ever anything like that for you?
Well, I had, I think I was on the radar for most fans. Most of the fans are starting to really kind of appreciate how hard I worked all the time, and my reactions going out to the rings were getting better. Everything with me was I can remember when I first came to WWF, there was a lot of people that used to talk about me having no charisma, and I had no personality, and I had this and I had that, or I didn't have this and I didn't have. But the truth is, it all comes from confidence. And most of the time for me, it was I was always putting somebody over. Always putting somebody over. We need you to put Mr. Perfect over because he's going to work with Hulk Hogan next. And it's well, what about me? What you guys were? They promised me so many times that they were going to give me this big push, and that big push usually was me tripping out of the starting gate, losing my first match, and then losing, I lost to Bad News. They had me break the trophy in that WrestleMania 3 or 4 or whatever. And it was I'm so close to, it's kind of a break. I remember it was kind of cool that I got to be one of the guys at the end with the Battle Royal. But then when it came to me wrestling Bad News and exacting my revenge, I lost every night to him and got carried. And I go, that's how my babyface run started, tripping out of the gate. And it's a few weeks later, and it's I'm losing every night to Bad News, or I'm losing to Perfect, or I'm losing to this guy, and I'm losing. And they go, well, it's not working. He's not getting over. We thought he was ready, but he's not. And it's not me that wasn't ready. It's you guys that are not ready. And then it really came to a head, I think, after we lost the belts to the Nasty Boys, and we were in Las Vegas the very next day, and they came in and they said we needed me to come up with a move, a finishing move, a submission move, and we talked about the Scorpion Deathlock or whatever it is that Sting used, and somebody asked me if I knew how to put it on, and I said, I've never used it. And I went into the dressing room and asked somebody if anyone knew how to put on a Scorpion Deathlock, and Conan put his hand up and said he remembered how to put it on. And we went in the showers and kind of practiced around a little bit, and he showed me how it worked. And so I had a meeting with Vince that day, right after all that, and I remember they said, we're going to put you with Kurt Hennig. I remember I said, I don't want to work with Kurt. He just won the belt. And they said, yeah, but it's going to be great. You're going to have great matches. And I go, yeah, but I'm going to trip out of the starting gate again. He just won the title yesterday. Surely he's not going to be losing it to me. So I'll wrestle him and lose every night for the next 3 months, wrestling Kurt. And then somebody else is going to step up and take my spot. And they'll end up. I figured in my mind, I knew accurately, just guessing though, that the belt would probably change hands at SummerSlam, is what my head told me. And that's when I want to be in position for them to go, okay, we'll put you with Kurt. And but I remember they wanted me to work with Kurt right off the bat, and I said no, I refuse to do it. I'll just go home. And you can call me when you're ready to give me this big push you've been promised me for 8 years. And I remember they sort of rethought it, and they ended up giving they gave Davey Boy to Kurt for a while, which was fair because Davey had just come in and they'd be kind of fresh. And as it turned out, by the end of summer, I was picked to work with Kurt in SummerSlam, and then my real push started. But it's a chess game sometimes. You have to know when to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, And I'd been around long enough to watch all these chances go to everyone else, and it was like, hold it, this is my chance now. When you guys promised me forever you're going to give me a chance, give me my chance. And in fact, I finally did get that chance.
Yeah, and it turned out very well. Okay, they call them enhancement matches, and it's something we've all been waiting to see. They needed to put somebody over, big time. They knew the man to go to. So let's get to it. We've been waiting for it. Folks, let's bring out Tom McGee. Tom, welcome. Great to see you. I know you guys haven't talked in a while. So have you grab a microphone there. Just pick it up. So, what have you been up to? I think, Tom, though, what we need to do, though, is just give a little background, because you were an incredible athlete before you arrived into wrestling. Tell us a little bit about your background before that.
Yeah, I grew up doing sports and always really loved physical culture, and so I competed in most individual sports and also a lot of team sports as well. And then before I came to wrestling, I was already a world champion powerlifter and also had won, I think, the best international strongman contest, world championships at the time, world record holder, and had just played some professional football also. So then I went into Stampede Wrestling, was how I got started.
Yeah, with Stu. And so you had these, you were an unbelievable athlete. And legitimately, not only did you have this great physique, but we were used to seeing when you talk about strongmen, they look like Mark Henry. But you legitimately won these strongman competitions. Had great skills as a gymnast as well. What led you to wrestling? What led you to Stu Hart?
So I was doing these other athletic and sports activities, and when you develop these physical abilities, you're always looking for the best place to put yourself where you can make use of the skills that you've learned and the abilities that you've acquired. And what captured my imagination was I was watching the first WrestleMania, and I thought, wow, that looks really great and interesting. And it really, as I say, it captured my imagination. And I thought, I can really see myself doing that. And I imagined things I could be a part of in that. And so then I had my manager contact the WWE, the WWF at the time, and from there I made my way to Stampede Wrestling, where I met Stu Hart, and I started on the journey to acquire the skills.
Bret, do you remember your dad saying anything about this kid that he?
Yeah, I do. I would only see the Stampede wrestlers, because I was one of the crew there with those guys for so many years. But once I got to WWF at that time, I was on the road like forever. I never seemed like I never got home. And when I did, the last thing I was going to go do was go hang around with the wrestlers and go to the wrestling show in Calgary. So I didn't really know everybody, and I didn't really I just wasn't fully informed of who everyone was and what they were doing. But there was a lot of really good wrestlers. My brother Owen was wrestling then, and Brian Pillman was wrestling for my dad then, and of course Tom was working. And just to look at Tom, just to see him in those days, and to hear my dad was always impressed by guys that were, really strong or really good wrestlers. And when you met Tom, you knew he was, there was a possible superstar here that was going to really could be a real asset to everybody, because he looked like I'll say Tom looked better than Warrior did as far as body went, which is incredible. Saying something. And at the same time, he was legitimately one of the world's strongest men, and all the stuff that Tom could do with the somersaults and backflips off the top. What really happened for me was Owen. I got Owen finally. Owen was really good too. He was ready for primetime wrestling, I think, at that time, and a lot of people wouldn't have thought so, including Owen maybe. But I was really eager to see Owen get down to WWE or WWF, and Owen finally had his tryout that same day that Tom did. In fact, I didn't expect to see Tom, and then Owen showed up for a tryout, and so it was just a coincidence that Owen was there. But when I found out, someone came up to me and said, "Yeah, you're wrestling," and I knew Tom had just started in Calgary. He had literally maybe a couple months experience.
I want to think it was at least 6 months.
Okay, so 6 months experience. And I remember I was tag team champion with Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and they came up to me and told me that they needed me to work with Tom McGee, and Tom McGee was going to go over. And I was like, really? Like, this new guy that can't even wrestle is going to beat me on TV? And it's like, I didn't refuse to do it. I just said, I want to talk to Vince about it and find out, why am I doing this? Like, I thought I was in a higher position, and if you need someone to do a job or a job guy, there's a whole bunch of them in the dressing room that could be better suited than me. I'm your tag team champion. And I remember Vince said, I think he was really smitten by Tom, like really blown away by how he looked and I think he saw a real superstar. Like I think he saw one of his future champions. Like, he had everything. Tom had everything, but just now it was a question of whether he could wrestle or not. And when I talked to Vince, he said, I really want this guy, I want to see what this guy can do. And you're the only one that can bring out that kind of reaction from the crowd. And if he wins, he's not going to get the right reaction if he loses. And then Vince promised me the match would never, ever be seen, ever. And
Ever.
Another lie, but...
Before we talk about the conversation you two had, you've been to Japan, had some experience, not much. Did you feel you were ready for this?
Well, I mean, from the get-go, when I started wrestling, I was looking to get into the WWE. That was my target. And so I think actually I had been in Stampede, and I might be wrong, but I think I had been up there training under your dad's, watchful eye, but also with Bruce, and of course Owen was usually there as well. maybe even for, it might have been a year. And I'm not sure if I'd been to Japan yet at that point, but what was the question again?
Were you ready? I mean,
Oh,
did
was
you think
I
you were
ready?
ready for this? This
Oh,
was a
so
big
then
moment.
I got the opportunity to go in. And so you've been already a professional athlete for a long time, where you're out there to do whatever the sport is and to accomplish it. And so you're very focused, and and you're ready. You have a can-do attitude. And I have been trained by these top people in the business. So when I had the opportunity to go in there, first of all, it's very exciting. And when you're in Stampede Wrestling, there's a lot of people who are in there, they want to get up to that level, but their chances of getting there aren't that great. Yeah. But they're really all trying, and you get the feeling of how significant and important it was. Yeah. So I took it very seriously, and I was very happy to be there and grateful to be there. But once you get there, nothing can prepare you for it, because you show up there and there's thousands of people, and you've got all these bigger-than-life characters, including Vince McMahon. And it's like in your presence, they're like vignettes. You're walking through, and all of a sudden, boom, there's this figure, and then there's another one, and then there's the people in authority, and you can hear them talking like, let's put him with this person, let's put him with that one, and then you're shuttled off somewhere else. And it's just like sensory overload, what's going on.
Kinda
it's so
surreal.
intense.
Yeah. So I want to hear what the conversation was before you went out there. Folks are going to watch along with us. The WWE Network, it's 19 minutes and 40 seconds in for a second screen experience. Bret, what did you tell him before you guys went out there?
Well, Vince kind of put it out to me that he wanted me he wanted to see if Tom could be his next superstar. He had, and pretty much told me I have really high hopes for this guy and big plans for this guy. So I need to see what he can do. And like I say, that was at a time period when I didn't have a lot of that recognition yet that I got as being the excellence of execution and being this guy that could have a match with anybody. And I remember I looked at Vince and I stood up. I said, I'll show you what kind of talent this guy's got, and I'll give you this guy. When it's done, you'll see what a good wrestler he is, and I'll put him over, and I'll show him in his best light, where you go, okay, now I know what to do with this guy. So I remember I went. Like I said, I was not too thrilled about jobbing out to a guy that was I'll say a rookie, or even a guy that had little or no experience. And I felt I had, like I said, there was a lot of other guys that could have done that, I thought. But at the same time, the way Vince posed it to me, it was almost like a challenge. I need you to make this guy. I need you to. Right. So kind of like the documentary kind of says, it alludes to the hopeful making of one guy, which also ultimately turned into the making of myself. And right. I don't disagree with that. I know that I went up to Tom and I said, Tom, we're working. You're going over. Give me your best 3 moves that you can do. 3 things that you do really well. And he told me, I said, we're going to do a really simple match that's going to be I said, just trust me and follow me. And he gave me his 3 moves. I can't remember what they are. And, I haven't seen this documentary that everyone's talking about, and I haven't seen the match because it was stolen from my house by the girl that was in the documentary. Stole it from my house and never returned it. And so I was a little annoyed when I heard all this stuff about this Tom McGee match, because it was stolen from my archives. And but when I went and saw Tom, I said, we talked about some of the moves he could do, and I said, well, we'll do that, and then we'll do that one. And I said, we had 3 good spots for Tom to highlight his backflips and triple somersaults off the top turnbuckle and stuff. And we kept it really simple, which is important to anyone that wants to become a wrestler, is that all art is simple, and the best wrestling doesn't need to be so complicated and so choreographed that it never stops looking real. Yeah. Like, nobody fights like ballet dancers. And I don't know, I just remember going to Tom, and I said, they got big plans for you, Tom. You need to just trust me and listen to me. And Tom did. He trusted me. We talked over the 3 moves that he thought he'd like to put in the match somewhere, and we figured out where to put them. And it wasn't even, I don't remember even talking too much about the match. It was pretty straightforward, and Tom had been in the ring enough times there. He was pretty calm, and I think he trusted me, and we went out and had this match.
All right, and we want to get to it. So everybody who's watching, I'm going to count to 3 and then say play, and we'll take a look at it. You guys can talk through this match. Your mics are live. Anything you want to add to it, and then we'll come out with a little discussion. Okay? So here we go. 1, 2, 3, play.
Okay, so the match is already underway here.
He did look great, didn't he, Bret? Bret, at what points are you talking to him here?
I don't think any of them.
I think we're just getting into a flow, kind of in I'm trying to do the techniques that I've learned, the wrestling moves that I've learned, and the match felt like it had an energy and a flow to it, to me, like a natural kind of cadence, and of course I did trust Bret, and I was relieved, and because when I was training in Calgary, you'd always hear stories about Bret and Jim and what they'd been doing, and so to have the opportunity to work with Bret, I was just stoked. And
Well, I say it's all very simple. Sometimes the hardest part of a wrestling match is the first 5 minutes to kind of get people to start watching the match, and we just kept it very simple. And at this point, I put in a few moves for Tom to do for a guy like Tom that was a gymnastics guy and was quite agile with all this kind of stuff. To have him do a cartwheel or something, it looks so great, and not very many people could do it, and Tom could do it, I think, in his sleep.
Tom, you have not seen this, right?
I saw it once during a recent interview. But of course I had a lot of confidence being in there with Bret. I knew that the match, that I had my best chance of having a great match with the son of Stu Hart from the same school.
Bret could be a heel. And number 1.
They've been giving me the finger my whole career. What I like about this match is that you never see me talking. No. There's communications all the way through this match where there's things being said to each other, but you never see it. And it's just nice to see, considering when you watch wrestling today, all they do is talk in the ring. It used to be an art form.
Tell us when you did.
Tell me what?
Tell us when you did. When did you sneak that in there to help them through this?
Well, it's hard for me to remember exactly. I just know we had certain spots set up. This was one. It was like I choke him over the ropes, and when I think he's going to drop kick me again over the top. No, maybe not. Sorry. Wrong match.
It was a while ago.
But, we just kept it really simple, and I had a lot of, I was a heel tag team champion at the time, so I wasn't like a nobody. I was the people, especially we were a heel team, so there were a lot of people that didn't like us. But it was just important to teach, to teach Tom, and I think this was probably, I'm thinking without blowing my own horn, I was probably the best wrestler you ever wrestled up to that point, right?
Was who?
I was probably the best guy you worked with.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Up to that point.
Absolutely.
He'd worked with guys elsewhere, including maybe some of my dad's guys in Stampede Wrestling, but I was pretty experienced pro by this time, and I knew how to get Tom over, and I knew if he just trusted me and listened to me, I'd get enough heat on him to get sympathy, but I wouldn't eat him up, and I'd keep him alive with the right hope spots and stuff.
Tom,
So I'm talking to him right there, but you don't see it.
Tom, did you feel some magic in this, though, when it was going on? There was
I felt
special-
like that's a good word. I was saying it as like a great flow and a magic, but yeah, I felt like the match was really working, and I'm in there with one of the greats. And this wrestling is, as I learned, I ended up wrestling for 5 years, and it's very difficult to really do well. And in my experience, there's only a few people who can really do it super well, and Bret's one of those few. And so, this is the way you would want a wrestling match to feel. But, yeah, so but looking back, of course, I have a lot of recollections and memories that come while I'm watching it of things I'd forgotten.
Were there times during this, Bret, you're saying, yeah, I am showing this. I'm showing Vince how this is done? Wow.
I didn't really think that much of it. I was just trying my best to have a really good match. You know, the truth is I always try to do the best match possible with everybody I ever worked with all the time, which is why I think maybe I was as good as I was, is because I just had this sort of joy of telling a good story with another wrestler, right? Especially in this time. I'm driving the car in this match. I'm the bad guy. I set up everything. I can set the pace of the match, all the moves that follow, and when I want to get a little more heat up, I get more heat up. And Tom's kind of obliging me with whatever I need to do or whatever. And I remember I told him, I said, just listen to me. And Tom did a very good job of just listening to me. And I will say, just for the chance to say it, that Joey Morella was for sure by far the greatest WWE referee of wrestling ever. And he's a great asset in there too. You'd be surprised at how much Joey's helping me communicate with Tom and helping me get things done in the match. And I knew that this match was a huge opportunity for Tom, and I really wanted him to succeed. I had no problems making him look really good so that Vince would give him a big chance and he might be a big star in the company, and people would appreciate that I helped make him, but wrestling things don't always go the way you plan. But it's a very simple match, this match. It's not very complicated, and it's really good for people to learn from this match, because it's how it should be done.
And there's the finish. And Tom, thinking back, what was going through your mind when that was over?
I mean, you've been training for a long time, and you've been doing matches with lesser wrestlers, and now you're proud of this craft that you've developed, and so you want to have a good match, and you want to live into and embody and be this thing that you've chosen to be. And so I felt great about it. Less concerned about raising my hand at the end, more concerned about having done a good match, and also having had, in that case, the opportunity to show some of this different abilities that I had than most people. And so it felt great. And then, of course, whenever you have a job, you always you want to see the reaction you get from your peers and the people you're working for.
What I remember the most about that night, when I think about it, was coming back to the dressing room after the match. And I just came back like I always do. Like it was just another match to me. But I remember Dynamite Kid came up to me, and a couple other wrestlers had said to me that Vince went nuts watching this match, that he started jumping around, and he almost like he was going to have an orgasm or something. And, Dynamite told me that Vince went crazy and said, "That's my next champion. That's our next champion." And he was just going out of his mind with glee. And I remember I came back and nobody said anything to me. The only one Dynamite came up to me and told me, like whispered it in my ear, goes, "Vince just went nuts watching this match."
Vince didn't say a word to you.
Didn't say anything to me. Just like, so I always thought kind of went unrecognized, like, I didn't get the credit for making Tom. They thought Tom did it all himself. And I think they did believe that for a while. But I just remember kind of being disappointed because Owen had his first match that night and he bombed big time and they didn't bring him in. He screwed up a couple of his spots in his match and it just didn't come off very well. So I felt bad for Owen that he didn't do well, and the guy that I didn't even know was coming, basically he's got himself a job and he may get the world title in a few weeks or months from now. I don't even know. I really kind of like getting congratulated and at the same time you feel like it was like kind of felt bad for Owen. They stuck Owen with one of those enhancement workers that wasn't very good, and he couldn't do any of Owen's high-flying stuff. Owen used to climb up the ropes and do that thing where he bounces and jumps off, which was such an incredible move. But nobody could do those moves with him. They weren't skilled enough to, and they just stuck Owen with one of those jobbers, and he couldn't do it, and he screwed up all Owen's moves, and Owen had a disastrous debut performance, and at the same time, Tom stole the show and was the next superstar that was in Vince's eyes.
And Tom, what did Vince say to you? Do you remember? I'm sure you must remember it vividly.
I have remember conversations with Vince that really stand out. Like I remember talking to Vince about working out, and he would talk about how if he had a good workout, then he'd give himself bonus sets to do more workout and work out hard. And of course, as impressed, you have the leader of someone at the helm of such a big, successful business, but he's still in top shape. He looks like he can go in the ring himself. But in regards to the match, I never heard the feedback you're talking about either. I could feel the vibe that everything was really positive and things went well, but nobody told me that this means then you're ramped up to...
You're on your way.
You're on your way. None of that, no.
And why do you think it didn't happen?
Well, I did have a wrestling career. For 5 years I wrestled, but I didn't make it obviously to the level of that expectation or that possibility. And I was behind the curtain listening to Bret talk a little bit about his experience in wrestling, and then you're talking about how Owen also had all these abilities, but it's a very narrow and dicey way to make it to the top. And there's lots of ways to get detoured by something you do or something someone else does where it doesn't happen. I'm glad I got the 5 years and the incredible experiences that I had in the wrestling world, which is quite unlike, I think, any other journey in life. Would I have liked to have gotten up to be at the level that was possible, that people thought after they saw the match you and I had, to have had great matches with people at the, like Bret at the top level. And of course, everyone wants success in their life so they can do more for their parents. My dad is dead now, and I never had the opportunity to do so much for him as I would have had I been a WWE superstar. Still, I enjoyed the life I had. I enjoyed the experiences I have. I'm not suggesting all outcomes are the same, but life is good, and I love it. And so no matter what happens in life, it's wonderful to have consciousness and the gift of life. But yeah, it would have been great if circumstances had turned out that I had been able to take that higher road that our match suggested was possible.
Yeah. And Bret, so many phenomenal matches in your career, but you have to be proud of this one, that what you did for Tom McGee.
Well, I would say I would have done the same thing for any wrestler. And I was happy to do it for Tom. I was happy to do it for the countless wrestlers that I did work with all that time during those years. But I do remember, I think, I'm not sure if this match, I wrestled Macho Man on a Saturday Night Main Event, and I think it was in Seattle. But I remember being Macho Man and never wrestled each other, and Macho Man was really excited about working with me, and we we sat and sort of talked together and started working out a wrestling match for this Saturday night main event. And it was going to be such a great match. And we really put a lot of thought into the match. And it was a pretty complex and really going to steal the show on that Saturday night main event. And little did we know that Vince had scripted a whole idea of a match kind of in his own head about how he wanted it to go. So we have this meeting with Dick Ebersol and all these guys in Vince's office at the day of the match, and he goes, we need to do a thing where you work Randy's leg. You're going to injure Randy's leg, and you got to work on his leg for the whole match. And I was like, Vince, I said, if I work on Randy's leg, that means he can't run. And then we've got such a great match mapped out. It's going to be like a 5-star match. It's going to be, it probably would have been the best match I'd ever done up to that time. And it was such a classic, great match all set with Randy, and we'd mapped it out. And he goes, no, you can't do any of that. You got to work the leg. That's the story that we're, and I was like, but it kills the match. Like, it's going to be a slow, where we don't get to do all the running. We're both really fast style wrestlers. And he goes, that's it. And I remember he snapped at me in the dressing room, in his office, and said, you're the big wrestling genius. Figure it out. And I remember kind of sitting there, kind of almost a little bit embarrassed, like he kind of shut me up. And I remember sitting there going, I'm the great wrestler, figure it out. And I remember, for me, it was a little moment of like, that's a pretty big compliment to have Vince McMahon say, you're the big wrestling genius, figure it out. And I remember I took it as a huge compliment, like, okay. So we did, we figured it out, and we worked a match where we worked Randy's leg, which wasn't as good, but I mean, we did it. But it just, what I guess I'm saying is that I started to realize that maybe that match I had with Tom stuck out in Vince's mind, and it's like they started to realize that I could be a much bigger star than they had anticipated.
The best there is, the best there was, the best there will ever be. Tom McGee, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Bret the Hitman Hart. Thanks for the words, Bret.
Okay, our first event here at StarCast 2, Bret the Hitman Hart and Tom McGee in that classic matchup, David, and we've got a whole lot more coming up, including a look back at the I Quit match.
Oh, yes. Tully Blanchard and Magnum TA. It's going to be a fantastic time. There's so much more to come.
Right.
So much excitement.
Right.
I can't wait.
Plenty of meet and greets are going on as well. David, boy, it's been great connecting with you this weekend.
This is terrific.
Okay,
Really
absolutely.
is. All right.
Okay. David,
you guys have as much fun as me.
All right.
right.
David Crockett and Tony Schiavone, we got the I Quit match coming up, our Monday Night Wars as well.